Shalom, I'm Richard Peritz, and our special show today is with the Deputy Speaker of Israel's Knesset, Mr. Danon. We'll be speaking about Israel's situation in a rough neighborhood at this time in history, and we'll talk about the need to promote a better understanding of Israel's achievements historically throughout these years. We'll meet Mr. Danon following these messages.
The Israeli city of Sderot is located less than 1 mile from Gaza. About 20,000 people live in Sderot. 3,000 of them are school-aged children. Palestinian terrorists first fired rockets at Sderot from the Gaza Strip in 2001. Over 8,000 rockets have been fired during the last 8 years. In recent months, rocket fire has become an almost daily event. There have been some days that 50 rockets were launched from Gaza into Sderot.
ואיך היה היום? אתה יכול לספר מה היה?
היה טרמפולינות.
וואו.
The border of the Gaza Strip is only 3 miles away. So for almost 10 years now, we are counting over 9,000 rockets. Try to imagine an 8-year-old child or a 2-year-old child. This is the only reality they know. If you go outside, whenever the alarm goes off, you must make sure that there is a shelter within a few steps away from you. It's something they do without even thinking, which is the really sad part about their life here.
Israel's civilian population was targeted by Hezbollah rockets from southern Lebanon. And in 2009, when rockets fired by Hamas during the Gaza war struck Israeli communities in Shar HaNegev, Sderot, and Ashkelon, and as far as Yavne and Gedera, and east to Kiryat Gat and Beersheba. Provisions and comfort, high alert throughout the conflict, racing to the scene of 1,180 rocket attacks, treating and evacuating 770 casualties. Thanks to the skill and commitment of MDA staff and volunteers, only 4 civilians lost their lives.
With us now is Danon, Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Israel's Parliament. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Shalom, Richard. It's my pleasure.
A first question I'd like to ask you is, how do you perceive Israel's position at this dramatic time in history?
The Zionist project is not over. We're in a process. We need to continue to work, continue to fight. We have major threats coming mainly from Iran that we will have to deal with them. It is not only the role of Israel to deal with the threat of Iran, it's the role of the Western societies. And I expect from the US administration to join us in this effort, to put crippling sanctions on Iran and to make a change. Because we can deal with the Hezbollah by ourselves. We can deal with the Hamas by ourselves. But to deal with Iran, it must be a global initiative.
You know, we look at how the media portrays the situation in the Middle East, and we see so much hypocrisy. We see terrible events in other parts of the world hardly mentioned, and when Israel retaliates after aggression such as that in the 2006 war, where thousands of missiles were bombarding Israel, and Israel finally, after a lot of restraint, retaliated, the world was complaining, oh, Israel's response is disproportionate, how they use a word like disproportionate as a tool to make Israel look like the bad person, the bad guy, and be the guilty party. What are your thoughts on how the media misrepresents Israel's position in the world?
Richard, I'll be very direct with you. Today it's not politically correct to be anti-Semite, but it is politically correct to be anti-Israel. And you see those reporters who hate us and they are biased, and instead of reporting, they're taking side. They are anti-Semites. I'll give you an example of the Goldstone report. We know it is a bunch of lies, and I prefer to deal with the Goldstone report rather than to have rockets in Sderot or Ashkelon. So we should do what's good for Israel. We should take the decision that will make our lives better and more secure, and then deal with Goldstone. And I'm sure in the future we will see other reports, other decisions coming from the UN condemning Israel, but we have to do what is good for us and then deal with the PR, and we know that we have to improve our PR. But take, for example, the flotilla coming from Turkey. That was an organized act of violence that coming from a Turkish government. Nobody condemned the Turkish government. They all attacked Israel, and I think we should attack back.
And I want to change subjects and talk about something more positive for a moment and ask you this. In 60-some years, Israel has turned the desert into lush farmland, has performed miracles that other countries look from the sidelines and probably are hopefully inspired, maybe envious. Why don't the neighbors of Israel follow the facts on the ground and realize that they'll have far more to achieve in peace than in their hopes of destroying Israel?
Unfortunately, we see that some of the leaders, not all of the leaders in the Middle East, they choose the path of hatred, the path of violence, and instead of investing in their population, in agriculture, in economy, they're investing in hatred. Look what they are studying today in the Palestinian Authority. They get funding from the US government, they get funding from the EU, but instead of teaching economy or mathematics or English, they're teaching hatred, they're teaching the children to hate Israel, and the leaders are choosing the path of terrorism. It is unfortunate, but that is the reality today.
This is all very interesting, sir, and I'd like to ask you, since the years I lived in Israel in my youth, how has society changed in Israel in the last, say, 20, 30 years, would you say?
Well, first, it's a great place to live, Richard, Israel. It's the best place to educate Jewish children. But I think we should do more on the Zionist aspect. We need to educate our children about Zionism. I was shocked to learn that 54% from secular kids will not be in Jerusalem until the age of 18. Only when they join the army, they get to see Jerusalem. And I push for legislation that will make it mandatory for every Jewish child to visit Jerusalem at least twice before they graduate from high school. Imagine that every Jew and Christian who come to visit Israel, the first thing they do, they go to Jerusalem. They go to the wall, they go to the city of David, they feel the presence of the holy sites. But we have Israeli children who do not get to actually be familiar with their values, with the history of the Jewish people. That's why I'm pushing very hard to bring every Israeli kid to visit Jerusalem.
Sir, tell us a little bit about the achievements of the State of Israel in 60 years.
I think everywhere you go, in the US and in Israel, you feel the presence of the Israeli high-tech. When you go to your doctor and you do the CAT scan, disc on key, a lot of things that we use on a daily basis in our cell phone, it was invented in Israel. And today the Israeli high-tech is one of the greatest assets we have as a society. We have a strong army, we have a very strong education system, but the mind of the young people who keep inventing and producing, I think many people come to Israel and invest today in biotech and in medical equipment because they know that it is the best place for Jewish mind is coming into action.
Again, it brings me to think of how much more could be achieved in peace and cooperation in the Middle East. And if the Arab countries who spent so much to destroy Israel in the course of 60 years, how much money have they spent on war and destruction? If they used one fraction of that money to build homes in Sinai or in other Arab lands, they could easily have resolved the issue of the Palestinian refugees instead of keeping them as pawns in refugee camps. What's your thought on why Israel's neighbors persist in keeping the Palestinians as pawns politically?
I think it is easier for those leaders to incite against Israel rather than to deal with the main problem of economy, education, welfare. I see it happening with the Arab member of Knesset who sits with me in the Knesset. Instead of dealing with the population that elected them into the Knesset and supporting the education system, they choose to support the Hezbollah, to support the Hamas, to support our enemies, because it's easier to promote hatred rather than to build something real. Because in order to build, it takes a lot of time, a lot of courage, and I hope that one day we will be able to focus. And as you said, imagine the amount of money that we, the Israeli government, are putting into the defense budget every year. If we could have put that money into research of medicine, imagine how many lives, not only of Jews in Israel, how many lives worldwide we could have saved if we had the opportunity to put that time, money, and brain into other fields.
This is very interesting, and I wanted to continue with more questions, but we have to pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back. We are back with Danny Danon. Sir, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the Golan. A few years ago, I visited the Golan, and we were wondering about how on one side of the street there was barbed wire, and it said danger mines, and on the other side were vineyards with grapes planted by Jews. The Arabs were planting death, the Jews were planting life, and they both claimed to love the same land. What are your thoughts on the Golan?
The Golan is the eternal part of the land of Israel. And Menachem Begin, one of the greatest leaders of the Likud party, one was asked what is the most important decision that he made. And he said, the decision that I passed in the Knesset to annex the Golan. He was healed that day, but he came to the Knesset and he voted for that bill. And I think today, you just need to come and be on the Golan Heights. And from there, when you watch the Galilee, you watch the land of Israel, the Sea of Galilee, you understand the importance and the beauty of the Golan. And today the majority, the overwhelming majority of Israelis are not willing to give away the Golan Heights. It is part of Israel, and we want peace. We're opening the borders, but we are not willing to give away the Golan. And I'm happy today that we have a government which is being led by the Likud, and that we say very strictly, we will not compromise over the Golan.
I certainly understand that point of view, and I spoke to scientists and archaeologists on previous visits, and they said you dig a hole on the Golan, at Katzrin for example, and you'll see Jewish mosaic stars, and you can actually date them and realize that long before Islam existed, there were Jews there.
Everywhere you go to Gamla, you go to the synagogue in Katzrin, everywhere you go, you see the presence of Jews in the Golan, and this is a major part. You don't have any Palestinian on the Golan, you don't have any Arab presence in the Golan, but still it bothers our enemies that we were successful, and today the people who live on the Golan are farmers, and it is one of the most spectacular tourist attraction in Israel, the Golan. When you go there during the summer and you enjoy the waterfalls, you enjoy the springs, and today I think it is not left or right, there is the overwhelming majority are in Golan. The people is with the Golan.
Another point of great concern is the fact that before the 1967 war, Syria was diverting the waters that go to the Sea of Galilee, and they already created canals and aqueducts to divert the waters away. Tell our audience a little bit about the history and how Syrian agriculture was using up all the water with unwise decisions in agriculture, and why they were trying to divert the water, and what the value of water is at this time.
As we all know, water is an asset in the Middle East, and if you have a peaceful, you can achieve a lot. Today with Jordan we have a peace accord, and we share the water with Jordan. With the Syrian it is a different case. In the past they tried to use force in order to take the water. Today they know that we will retaliate, and they're not doing it anymore. But I think if they really want to achieve peace, we can sit down and talk about how can we do more in the same region. Unfortunately, it is not the case. We see Syria is going toward Iran, toward the direction of terrorism, and not toward the West. Every once in a while, they're trying to get closer to the US by saying we want to have a peace talks with Israel, but they don't really have peace talks. They are busy in putting hatred. And today the leaders of the Hamas and probably Al-Qaeda and other organizations, they sit in Damascus. They do not sit in Jordan, they sit in Syria.
If God forbid Israel was destroyed as they would like, Do you believe that the aspirations of radical Islam would end, or do you believe they will continue trying to take over Europe and eventually the United States? There are many people who are concerned about this in Holland, Belgium, England, and the States. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first, I don't think, I think we will prevail. And history have told us that you had other empires, the Rome and other leaders, and we are here to stay. I don't think that's an option. But I'm sure that if we will not fight us, they would have been fighting each other before they would try to overtake the West. But the hatred to the Western society is not concerning Israel. September 11 didn't happen in Tel Aviv, it happened in New York City. Israel in the front line, so it's easier for them to attack us. But I am sure they will continue to attack any Western civilization that has different value that they have. This is the danger of the radical Islamic regime, and we see today that it is not only in the Middle East. You see it all over the world, and I think that we all have to watch it.
Arab regimes have been known to make agreements with each other, and in general, often they break their own agreements. There was the Iran-Iraq war, 1.25 million people killed in that war a couple of decades ago. Tell our audience your view on the reliability of Arab regimes in agreements one can make with them. Tell us what you think on that.
One of the things we cannot do is to choose our neighbors. We can do a lot, but we don't choose our neighbors. And we have to deal with them. And I think that we want to have peace accords with all of our countries, but we also be very strong. We cannot rely only on the accords. We should always keep our military capability. This is the most important asset for our security. We should seek peace, but at the same time, we should have a very strong army that just in case, we will be able to defend ourselves.
A question I'm asked often by people in this country, the United States, where the Shalom show is aired. The fact that so many Jewish people are so naively liberal in their views. Can you explain that?
I think that we all want to be naive and live peacefully, but it took more than 60 years for us Israelis to realize it is not about land for peace. It is not about what we are willing to pay in order to receive peace. We have tried it in Gush Katif, it didn't work. Today it is about finding a viable partner, and there is no viable partner. That is why it is not about what we are willing to give. Even if a government will decide to give away all of Judea and Samaria, to divide Jerusalem, still there will be no peace, because you have an enemy who doesn't seek something that you have. He wants to destroy you. And I think today most of Israelis have realized that, and I believe that also the American Jewry, you see the presence of more realistic approach, then it is not only about to blame Israel, it is about finding a viable partner.
Well, after the world saw what happened in Gaza, all the greenhouses, all the infrastructure, all the agricultural opportunity, $800 million a year in potential income, and the moment they got it as a gift, what did they do?
Well, that's what I said before. They are putting hatred in the mind of the children, and we have signed the Oslo Accord in 1993, 17 years ago, and still till this very day, you see that they are teaching the children to hate, to hate, and to hate. When the day they will change the curriculum, they will understand they really want to achieve peace and to take care of the population. But as of today, we see the path of hatred wherever you go in Gaza and in the West Bank.
If a family in any civilized country were investigated by the authorities and they were found to be brainwashing their own children with regards to suicide, killing, and violence, they'd be arrested and basically be accused of child abuse. Why does the world not see that equally in Pakistan and in other Arab countries?
I would say that the world should stop funding these activities. Why American taxpayers' money is going for education that teach to hate the Jews? And that's what happened today. Why EU, who gives millions of euros every year to the Palestinian Authority, do not demand from the Palestinians to stop the hatred, stop the incitement in the school? Why it doesn't happen? I think that's what we should ask the leaders in the US and in Europe. Why don't they stop the funding until they don't stop the hatred and the incitement in the schools?
Well, all we can do is hope for a better future with more intelligent solutions. To conclude this interview on a positive note, tell our viewers how you see the future and your plans for the future?
First of all, I want to invite all the audience to come to Israel. If you want to support Israel, come and visit Israel. It is very important for the tourism, for the economy, and for the people to see that we have visitors coming, Jews and Christians supporting Israel. And I think when you come, you will see a wonderful country, beautiful country with great culture, great places to enjoy and to travel. And I think that we have a lot of obstacles, but every year we are moving ahead. We're giving a better education for our children. And whenever you come, you should visit Jerusalem. And I will do my best to make sure that every Jew will come and see Jerusalem.
Mr. Danon, this has been a great privilege and a pleasure. And I want
Thank
to
you very much.
Let's hope for the best for Israel. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be right back. This brings us to the end of our special show for today from On Location in South Florida with Danny Danon, Deputy Speaker of Israel's Knesset. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.